Hello everyone, good evening. I'm Shreya Dhondiyal. Prime Minister Modi has chaired a meeting on Omicron as cases in India continue to surge steadily, 250 and counting. And what is worrying governments and scientists, not just here in India, but around the world, is the fact that a double dose of the vaccines are not stopping the infection. Sample this. Of the 34 Omicron patients the LNJP hospital in Delhi treated, 33 were double vaccinated and at least 2 had received a booster shot, not here in India but abroad. World over, restrictions have kicked in. The Dutch are going in lockdown mode. They've already gone into lockdown mode. China has completely shut down Xi'an, which is a city of 13 million people. But there is some encouraging news as well. In South Africa, where the Omicron first made an appearance and made many people sick, well, the peak is over in under a month. Their experience has been lower hospitalizations and fewer deaths compared to the Delta wave. In India, as we brace for what is to come, there are 2 questions we all need to ask. A, should India start giving boosters to its immunocompromised and the elderly and the frontline population? Because remember, this subset of people had been inoculated some 6 to 8 months ago. And secondly, why are we sitting on the fence when it comes to vaccinating children? First, take a listen to what top scientists in the country are saying on that. This is the Sarojini Nagar market on a weekday in the national capital. People, masked and unmasked, out for a spot of Christmas shopping, only making things easier for the fastest spreading variant of all times, Omicron. Omicron is spreading like wildfire across the country. It is now an unwanted guest in over 90 countries. In the US, in 1 week, it has gone from 3% to 73% of all infections. Why is it spreading so fast? According to scientists in Hong Kong, Omicron grows 70 times faster than Delta in bronchial tissue. So just after a day of infection, a person starts breathing out large quantities of it, just what the virus needs to infect others. Making matters worse, Omicron is beating the immunity shield of double vaccination and antibodies by previous infections. More than 10 studies worldwide have confirmed this. A new study by the Imperial College in London, where Omicron is the dominant strain, is adding to the worry. It says there is no evidence to show that Omicron is milder than the deadly Delta variant. Essentially, Omicron is a new beast altogether that will thrive in the festive season. The WHO is advising extreme caution.
An event cancelled is better than a life cancelled. It's better to cancel now and celebrate later than to celebrate now and grieve later.
More than 3.3 million people have lost their lives to COVID-19 this year. That is more deaths than from HIV, malaria and tuberculosis combined in 2020. India has double vaccinated 60% of its population, but Omicron is spreading fast. 200 plus cases and counting. Maharashtra, the state with the second largest number of cases after Delhi, is mulling closure of schools once again. Experts say a third wave is inevitable.
The mild wave peaks at sometime in February, somewhere between 100,000 to 150,000 cases per day.
In the face of Omicron, are boosters the best bet, especially for the elderly and kids? In South Africa, kids have a 20% higher rate of hospitalization than Delta. But a team of experts here in India has told the government there is no need to rush into vaccinating children.
To the parents, I have to say that please remember, more than 70% of the children in India have already been infected. without us knowing it. So there are certain diseases when children they deal with it without any fuss.
But many experts like Dr. Gagandeep Kang say that immunocompromised kids need to be vaccinated right away.
Children who are immunocompromised, children who have comorbidities are a special category and should receive vaccines straight away.
The WHO, meanwhile, has set the stage for boosters, saying it should be evidence-driven and target priority groups like the elderly, the frontline workers, and immunocompromised. This comes after its own advisory group had said that so far evidence suggests that there was only a minimal 8% reduction of protection against severe disease over 6 months after the second dose.
I think it was time for boosters for immunocompromised individuals 6 months ago.
Should India vaccinate kids, and should we give a third shot to frontline workers, the immunocompromised and the elderly? The answer, much like Omicron, is up in the air. In New Delhi, I'm Shreya Dhondia. Let me introduce my guest to you this evening. Dr. Shahid Jamil is a virologist, someone all of you know well, a popular face on television. Dr. Suranjit Chatterjee is a senior consultant internal medicine at the Indraprastha Apollo Hospital in the national capital. And Dr. Rajesh Parekh is director medical research at the Jaslok Hospital and Research Center in Mumbai, also the author of the book Coronavirus. Dr. Shahid Jamil, I'm going to start with you first, and I have two questions. And I'm sure these questions are not just mine. Many people who are possibly watching this broadcast want to ask you this as well. First of all, Dr. Jamil, South Africa, at least scientists in South Africa are saying that the country is past its Omicron peak and their experience is lesser hospitalization and substantially lower deaths compared to the Delta-driven third wave. Now, there is also a study from the Imperial College in London that says the opposite about the UK experience. They say there is nothing to suggest that Omicron is milder than the Delta wave. What do we believe? How do we reconcile these two?
Well, one possible way of reconciling is that in a country like South Africa, much like in a country like India, far too many people got infected during the Delta wave. Many of them succumbed to it, but those of us who made it through without possibly even knowing that we were infected have what is called a mixed protection, protection from both infection followed by vaccination. So that could be a possible explanation why countries like South Africa saw very little severe disease and hospitalization and mortality. And if you also remember, the peak in South Africa was a very steep climb, and then it seems to be declining as steeply. Whereas in the UK, it's a more flat increase, but a prolonged increase. So I think we're looking at different things here. It's possible to reconcile both. We'll just have to wait and see how things play out. But it appears to me that this mixed protection from both infection and vaccination is likely to give much less severe disease.
But then, Dr. Jamil, the fact is that there are at least 10 studies done around the world, and sometimes the findings are conflicting, but most studies seem to suggest that Omicron is passing through double vaccination, and even natural immunity doesn't seem to be stopping it. What is to say that we'll be safer than the UK's population?
Well, we're talking of apples and oranges here. What you're talking about is infection. And yes, Omicron is highly infectious. People who have been vaccinated, people who have had earlier bout of infection will not be protected from infection, but they do appear to be protected from disease. At least that is what the early reports are showing. So the difference is between infection and disease, and that's an important distinction to make throughout this pandemic. Also, don't forget that Omicron has come at a time which is very different from the time that Delta came. When Delta came, there was hardly any vaccination. When Omicron has come, there's both experience of vaccination as well as infection. So we are looking really at a different virus, and we're also looking at a different time when this virus has emerged.
So before I go to my other panelists, it's a double whammy then, Dr. Jamil. Omicron taking on the world means the Delta variant gets stamped out, hopefully, which was far deadlier, but more people will fall sick because vaccines are offering little protection. Am I correct?
Yes, you're right. More people will show mild infection. Some of them will progress to severe infection and severe disease and hospitalization. And that is why it is very important for us to understand that even a small fraction of a very large number tends to be a large number. Therefore, while we remain optimistic, we don't lag behind on preparation of hospitals, medical equipment, people, everything.
Dr. Parekh, the problem with India is if we get too optimistic, we also get very lax. We've seen that happen in the past. You know, there's been a lot of talk about how Omicron is milder than the Delta variant, and there are South Africa's experiences showing that, but the UK experience is completely different. Are you seeing enough restrictions come in, people taking enough protections, being serious about Omicron? Because I don't see it on the ground. It's almost like, there's another one, dekh lenge.
Good evening, Shreya. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I think it was amply clear from the preamble, the video that you showed us of the Delhi market, that people are not taking adequate precautions. And I don't think that's an isolated example. That seems to be true across the country.
Do you think it's time, I mean, would you say for people it's time to panic? I know doctors and government officials don't like to use the word panic, but is it now time to at least ring the alarm bell and say that, all right, it may be milder, people will not fall as sick as they did during the Delta variant, but people will still get infected and people will still have that fever and that body ache and headache, so better to stay at home. Is it time to press the panic button, sir?
Shreya, you used the word optimism in the previous question and the panic button and alarm in this. And I think a rational attitude is somewhere between those two approaches. And I think our decisions, whether they are at the policy-making level or whether they are at the individual level, need to be evidence-driven. And there were two important developments last week. I know you talked about a slew of studies, but I think there was a very important study which might also explain the dichotomy that you raised in the very first question of the program. And this was a study conducted by the University of Cambridge, United Kingdom, in which there were collaborators. Delhi was a collaborator, CSIR, there was Hong Kong, there was Japan and South Africa. And this was a laboratory-based study, but it's very important. And what they did in this study is they drew antibodies from people who had had two types of vaccines, an mRNA-based vaccine and an adenovirus-based vaccine. And in the laboratory, clearly Omicron was able to evade the vaccine-induced antibodies. What they did not do, and I assume they will do now, which will answer your first question, is look at what happens with disease-induced antibodies. So it was quite clear in the laboratory, and that is being reflected in what we are seeing on the field. But the other development is you showed the Director General of the WHO who talked about this celebrate and regret kind of thing. And, last week he made an announcement saying that we should stop using the words mild variant. In other words, mild should no longer be an adjective for this mutant variant, because that causes the kind of optimism you raised in your previous question to me. And then what happens is the reaction to that, when you see a whole lot of people in hospitals, is hitting the panic button. So while it's not time to press the panic button, it's certainly time for us to be careful, and it's long overdue that we should have started on our booster program.
Dr. Chatterjee, is it also time for the government of India to finally take a decision on booster doses? I mean, I understand that the WHO has come out with a statement and people are saying it's setting the stage for booster doses, but I frankly didn't understand what they said. They said it should be evidence-based and priority should be the vulnerable group. Is it time for India to seriously say, okay, as far as immunocompromised are concerned, frontline workers are concerned, immunocompromised kids are concerned, let's go with the booster?
I will not say that boosters are meant for everybody right now, because India itself is not vaccinated. We have to first give the first 2 doses of vaccine to everybody. We have to reach maximum number of population which is eligible, so that they are vaccinated against the 2 doses at least. But I would definitely agree with you that the immunocompromised, the healthcare workers, even including the immunocompromised children, should get the booster doses, because at least what evidence we have till now, this evidence might change in the next couple of weeks or whatever it is, the evidence that we have is that that it has an immune escape phenomena, this virus mutant. Also, the immunity levels do wane off as days go by or as weeks go by. So it's important that we protect at least the vulnerable people and the healthcare workers, because if healthcare workers are not there, then it's a problem. You have to also realize, as Dr. Jamil said, that even if the infection is serious only in a few people, the denominator is so large that because of its high transmissibility, the denominator is so large that even if a fraction of the patients become sick, it is going to be a huge burden on the healthcare system. So we need to be really, really careful from now. The citizens themselves, the government itself, they both have to be proactive so that we can avoid this wave. Immunization is important. Immunize the people who are not vaccinated, and also we have to think of this booster dose, at least for the vulnerable and the immunocompromised.
Dr. Jamil, can we really, as you know, India has vaccinated double vaccinated 60% of its population. Can we really wait for another 5 months or 6 months to inoculate the entire population with a double dose before we can start thinking of boosters? Will that not be too late, sir?
No. So, it's very clear that boosters need to be given to the vulnerable population. In fact, if you believe one Imperial College study that you were just citing, also believe another Imperial College modeling study which came out last week, which very clearly showed that there is a public health impact, saving about 5% extra deaths if you use available doses to vaccinate, to give boosters to the vulnerable. Instead of using those doses on younger people who have just to cut transmission. So I think we need to take a serious stock of this situation, make a policy on boosters, and a policy means that you will figure out who to vaccinate, what vaccines to use, how many doses you're going to use, and all that. And, it's not that if you make a policy today, you can start rolling out tomorrow. It will take time. So it's high time that India makes a policy. And it's also high time that India makes vaccines available that will be eventually used as boosters. I mean, we have a large manufacturing base in vaccines. We have vaccines that could be made available as very good boosters, and that's based on a Southampton University study published on the 2nd of December. And that's a protein vaccine I'm talking about. I just cannot understand that there is this vaccine which has been approved by WHO. It has now been approved by the European Medicines Agency, and the Indian regulator keeps asking for more local data. I just don't understand this. This is an ideal vaccine for a booster. Let's get on with it.
Let's get on with...
We won't have this problem of deciding whether to give boosters or not to give boosters.
And let's get on with at least planning for booster doses to be given to the immunocompromised and frontline workers. Dr. Jamil, we'll leave it there for the moment. Dr. Chatterjee, Dr. Parekh, good to have you on the show. Thank you very much. I want to play out a report from China for our viewers now. The city of Xi'an, which is in northern China, it's a city of 13 million people, has been put under lockdown as health officials try to contain a spike in locally transmitted COVID-19 infections. Here's Selina Wang with more on that.
The Chinese city of Xi'an and its 13 million residents have been put under strict lockdown. The city has recorded more than 200 COVID-19 cases since December 9th. Residents are largely banned from leaving their homes, but one designated person from each household will be allowed to leave every 2 days to buy groceries. Otherwise, residents are only allowed to leave in the case of a medical emergency or for, quote, urgent or necessary works. That's according to the local government. Xi'an has also shut down all schools, public transport and facilities, except for essential service providers. This is the fourth time a major Chinese city has been placed under strict lockdown. The first was back in early 2020 when Wuhan, ground zero of the pandemic, went into lockdown. With the games now less than 45 days away, the country is doubling down on its zero COVID strategy. Cities are locking down and mass testing residents in response to just a handful of COVID-19 cases in the country. Olympic participants will have to be in a strict bubble and tested daily. If they are not vaccinated, they'll have to quarantine for 21 days upon arrival. If China pulls off the Winter Olympics successfully, it would be a propaganda win for its handling of COVID-19 and for its authoritarian system. Selena Wang, CNN, Tokyo.
Up next, we are showing you how sharks could be helping the world fight COVID-19. Do stay with us. In the US, Omicron is now the dominant variant, putting people back in hospital, but that isn't stopping people's travel plans. And the news from South Africa? Well, there's some good news there. Take a look.
From New York to Los Angeles and pretty much everywhere in between, the drive to get tested for COVID ahead of the holiday weekend is in full swing, and tests are in short supply. President Joe Biden, in an interview with ABC News, again responding to suggestions that his administration failed to anticipate the need for more tests.
No, I don't think it's a failure. I think it's, you could argue that we should have known a year ago, 6 months ago, 2 months ago.
Biden also addressing a positive development, the FDA's Wednesday emergency use authorization of Pfizer's antiviral COVID-19 pill.
We've purchased several million already. I think it'll be a matter of weeks to a month to get the pills.
It's the first oral antiviral for COVID-19 authorized for symptomatic people to take at home before they get sick enough to be hospitalized. The Biden administration indicating that 250,000 treatment courses will be available starting in January, the first of 10 million courses purchased. And in South Africa, where the Omicron variant was first detected, one of the country's top researchers says they've passed the peak of their Omicron outbreak and are now seeing a rapid decline in cases. Dr. Anthony Fauci also pointing to new data on the severity of Omicron.
It appears that in the context of South Africa, there is a decrease in the severity compared to Delta.
Fauci said more research is needed to know if that could end up being the case in the U.S. I'm Reed Binion reporting.
And researchers in the US are studying nurse sharks as a potential way to fight COVID-19. Here's the report.
Deep in a laboratory at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine.
So you guys want to eat?
Is a shark tank.
They'll just come right up here.
While they may have menacing names, it's all based off James Bond villains.
Goldfinger, we have Sir Hugo Drax, we have Mr. Stamper, and we have Knick Knack.
These nurse sharks are actually quite tame. Researchers such as Aaron LeBeau are studying them, hoping to find another way to fight COVID.
We discovered a shark antibody that is pretty much immune to all the variants that are currently out there.
LeBeau says shark antibodies are 10 times smaller than human antibodies and extremely potent. Plus, nurse sharks have 4 types of antibodies, potentially perfect to use in attacking COVID spike proteins in future strains that could be resistant to vaccines.
So in theory, you can administer a shark antibody to a human, and the human's immune system will recognize it as itself.
These 4 sharks will stay in here for years being closely monitored in what LeBeau says is the only shark antibody research lab in the world. Eating whole foods, shrimp and octopus, and getting their blood drawn once every 7 weeks.
Sharks have been around for 500 million years. They've survived 5 mass extinction events, so they're obviously doing something right.
In Madison, Caroline Reinwald, WISN 12 News.
At this point, whatever helps. With that, it's a wrap from me. Thanks for watching. Good night.